194. Real Talk Live is a presentation
we
of the More
advertised
FM
you
Radio
yesterday and
Network.
today, so
All rights
hopefully
are
you'll do for the
reserved.
listeners.
Real Talk Live is on right now on More 94. More 94.
All right, let's go. Good morning. You ready? Good morning. This is Professor Tinker. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk Live. Today's going to be a very, very interesting day, like all our interviews, but more interesting that we have a man of great capacity that's joining us today. We have, he has so many titles. I think the only title he's trying to get now is the Right Honorable.
Not that one.
But he has a lot of titles. We have Mr. Brent Symonette in studio with us, and I'm going to give a quick intro on my side, and then we'll bring him in on the other side of the after the first break. But Brent Symonette is the son of Sir Roland Symonette, the first and the last Premier of the Bahamas. Attended Brunel University in London, and a Bachelor's of Science with honors in politics and law. He's called to the bar as a member of the Inner Temple in London and to the Bahamas Bar in 1978. Symonette was also appointed to the Senate, the non-elected and less prestigious branch of the legislature, and in 1987, the FNM founder and the opposition leader, Sir Cecil Wallace Whitfield. He was again appointed to the Senate in 92 to 2002 by Prime Minister Ingram, and from 92 to 2002, Symonette served in various times as Minister of Tourism, Attorney General, Chairman of the Hotel Corporation, Chairman of the Airport Authority, etc. He's said to be, when he disclosed, according to my sources, at that particular time, at a net worth of 56 million. But however, the disclosure reportedly that does not include all of his trusts and partnerships in some estimated Symonette supposedly worth. He can discredit this if you want after the show, in excess of $250 million. Symonette nevertheless lives very modestly and supports many causes without fanfare and behind the scenes, and I would have to agree to that too, because I showed up here and he's driving an F-150. You think this guy would be driving down in some Bentley, but he's in an F-150, and shows how modest and humble he really is. He's also been involved in local tourism developments, including Mount Vernon, Royal Valley, the Vista Marina West. His business interests reportedly includes Bahamas Hot Mix, Commonwealth Bank, Bahamas Fast Ferries, Abaco Markets, Town Center Mall, Costrite Wholesale, and Solomon Wholesale. He's also currently a ratified candidate in the FNM in the St. Anne's constituency. He's been around politics all his life. To be born into, I would say, politics because of his father. So we definitely have a rounded interview for Symonette to discuss where he came from, where he's been, and where he's trying to go, and what he sees for the future of the Bahamas. I still think he has a good bit of expertise and some good qualities to offer the Bahamas. And I'll tell you one thing: as I was doing the research on Mr. Symonette, I saw him in a different light prior to my investigation and research. And so funny, the U.S. Embassy paints him in a very nationalistic view, that he's a Bahamian nationalist. And the U.S. Embassy, I think, up to today, and he can confirm or deny this, still think as Brent Symonette as a very close ally and good for the U.S. relation and good for the Bahamas. So with that said, you have a guy that's seen by the great superpower as a pro-nationalist, as someone who's very interested in the development of the Bahamas, compared to other former ministers that the U.S. Embassy would have criticized and critiqued. So that right there, seeing, based on what I've researched and gathered, this is a man I think who has a whole lot to offer. But as we get further into the interview, maybe in some ways during his time in politics might have been handicapped because of past legacy, and probably didn't really get to do what he wanted to do in his own vision, trying to take this country in a different way. Because I think the race issue has definitely dwindled down in the country, even though it might be a little still around a little bit. But the Bahamas, with 6 or more million Mostly, I would say, out of that 6 million, probably 4.5 million white tourists coming through the country with all the different mixed races, whether it be with Cubans, white Americans, Asians, etc. I think the race card is not so much of a big deal as it was maybe 40, 50 years ago. So I think the Bahamas is definitely moving in a different direction. And to tell you the truth, is no time to play that card on one guy and single one individual out when we definitely have a country to build. And his contribution, this was an individual that sat around and did nothing, and basically said, you know what, screw everybody. I got money. I don't have to get involved in this. But he did a lot of grunt work. He was a soldier on the battlefield. So we're definitely going to dig into him on this interview, and he's a lawyer, so I know he has his best political science and criminal justice, so he knows he can't play the fifth and fiddle around in the studio today. We'll definitely have mutual respect for each other in this interview, and it's not a bashing interview, but it's just to pull out and allow Mr. Symonette to show his inner self and his real light to the Bahamian people on this upcoming election, and show why he decided to come in so late in the game, though earlier in the years after the 2012 election, he always hinted that if he feels that the government or the Bahamian people need him in any capacity to keep the country on the right direction, he will offer himself. And I could have heard that multiple times from many news outlets. He was hinting at the comment, but never gave any indication that he would return only if he felt that that his presence was needed in government to make the country better. With that said, Real Talk Live was brought to you today by Super Wash, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, the Air Conditioning Depot, PTC Stay with the company that connects every island, rock, and key, Nationals Workers Cooperative Credit Union, Virgo Car Rental, the Water and Sewage Corporation, Storm Frame Windows, Bahamian Brewery Company Limited, Wendy's, Marco's Pizza, Popeyes, Paisley Cosmetic Experience. And please listen to us, tune into the show today. You can also see us on More 94 FM on YouTube, Facebook. We're streaming live. Also, if you're abroad in the U.S., and I probably would say this and you can't hear, but you can also download the More 94 FM at Google and the Apple station, or you can listen to us through TuneIn Radio. And after the show, you can also share this video all over the place, because we're gonna talk a very, very in-depth conversation with Mr. Symonette, his vision in the FNM, his vision for the future of the country, and the chances that the FNM is going to have at the poll now that the date has been released, May 10th, 2017. We will know then who's going to take over the government. So we'll be right back after these brief messages, and stay tuned for the interview with Mr. Brent Symonette. I did a little bit of homework, man. But either way, I always say people that want to lead, if your
Yeah, but you
background
got the toilet tea for in the parliament too.
yeah, if your background is crappy, stay out of it. You know, you can't push how you want to change the country when your background sucks. It's a conflict of interest.
Ready?
All right, let's go ahead. Morning and welcome to Real Talk Live. You're going to jump right in it because we're short for time. We've lost 14 minutes already. And Mr. Symonette, he's hot. He's ready to go. He's agitated. He wants to answer these questions. You know, he wants to answer these questions. All right, morning.
Morning.
Did I leave anything out from that brief intro that I did?
No, some things weren't 100% accurate, but
All right.
we'll deal with those later.
We'll deal with those later. All right, listen, many people are listening, especially here in Nassau and the other islands, and in the USA, especially the embassy. So I have designed these questions around you and your past and your present involvement in politics. In a quick snap, who is Brent Symonette?
Brent Symonette, as you said in the introduction, my father was the first Premier of the Bahamas, the longest serving member of Parliament in the Bahamas, notwithstanding how Mr. Christie tries and rewrite history. He's only served a mere 30-something years. My father was a member of Parliament for 51 years.
Wow.
My brother was Speaker of the House of Assembly. He served the Exuma seat for some 20-odd years, and I've been in frontline politics for 20-odd years, having been born into politics. That's my political side. My academic side, you covered in my bio. My personal side, I'm married with 3 children, and that pretty well covers in the snapshot version where you want it to be.
All right, and because, again, I don't know you from Adam. I just met you at the rally one day. I said, hey, that looks like the guy whose father's on the money. Let me go and ask him real quick. Would you like to do an interview? And I guess that's how it all began. Besides hearing about you, that was the first time I'd ever met you. But how was it like to be the son of the Premier? Can you recall those times?
Yeah, I mean, politics was different back there. I mean, there was a red phone sitting on the table at home.
You had a red phone?
A red phone, you know.
Man, you were like JFK.
The old type phone, you pick it up and say, hey, you know. But my old man wasn't into pomp and ceremony. I remember the first time after he became Premier, the motorcycle escort turned up late and he left him and went about his business. Now you go down the street, you hear the Prime Minister coming 300 miles away because the siren's blowing and 15 outriders and everything else.
Wow.
So it was a totally different. Politics was a lot different then. Remember in those days, Parliament met in the evening.
Right.
It was not a full-time job as it is now. I mean, obviously the cabinet was, but not necessarily Parliament. So the Bahamas has developed a lot since then.
Right. It's definitely changed. Now, because we're going to be jumping real fast because I want to cover a lot of questions. So you would have been around and seen how your father would have governed the country.
Yes.
So at this stage in
And I
your
worked
life,
behind the scenes with him in his campaigns in Shirley and various constituencies.
were you in agreement in the way your father governed the country at that time and now?
You know, unfortunately, what I say, some people aren't going to believe. So
you say it. Listen, this is your opinion, and we're not.
A lot of people who are commenting on the UBP government,
right?
A number of them did not know R.T. Symonette or Pop Symonette.
Right.
He was not that type of person. Those persons that knew him.
When you say type, define type.
What they're trying to say, this
say
Bay Street boys, this
racist.
Correct.
Don't be afraid to say it. Just say it.
I never heard a racist comment come out of my old man's mouth.
Okay.
Never was. I mean, you can only look back in history and see the number of churches, the number of charities, the number of people, the number of scholarships that he gave.
Right.
Those people, many of them who are alive today, can attest to the fact that there was no question there. I don't want to name the churches, but there are some very prominent churches on Meeting Street, Blue Hill Road, Ridgeland. You just name any.
Your father contributions.
Contributed or built.
Now, during his premiership or afterwards?
During my lifetime.
During your lifetime.
So
okay.
Before and after. So this is not something that started in 19 whatever. It was throughout my father's life.
Right.
My father was the youngest of 9 children, born in the Colonel Lutheran. Took his shoes, put his shoes on when he got into church. That type of person. So this wasn't a guy that, as different than me, that inherited a couple of dollars. He worked his way up, worked very hard, had children, and left some money to his children, which I inherited.
Right.
So no question. I inherited $10,000 from my father.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the baby.
You're the baby, and you only
Baby
got
back.
10,000.
My brother and I, that's all we got.
So this $250 million thing.
See, this is where people go crazy. But
Let's correct it.
Let me make sure I correct it. Under my dad's will, I got a watch, a pair of cufflinks, $10,000. The rest went to my mother.
That's the $250 million would have went to her.
Whatever you all try and
No,
say.
Now that was cited by the U.S. Embassy. Is that incorrect?
No, they're talking about me, not my
Oh, they're
mother.
talking about you.
They're talking about me.
Okay, they're talking about you. Gotcha.
So therefore, after my mother died, yes. And I remember Fred Mitchell saying very sarcastically in Parliament that my public disclosure went up tremendously and I must have made that money while I was a cabinet minister. The same guy who tried to talk last night about lying and defamation, same fella.
Right.
And I had to say to them, look, it was very simple. My mother died.
Right.
Very insensitive of him, but defamation and everything else.
Right.
So yes, I did inherit some money from it. But I've also worked hard.
Right.
And I've made money.
Right.
So begrudge me how you want to.
Right.
But come and work with me.
Right.
And, I get up early in the morning, I work long hours, and I earn what I make.
Bottom line is your father was not a racist.
No.
Bottom line.
Absolutely not.
And your family is not prejudiced.
No.
Bottom line.
Bottom line.
And your kids.
Not in the one slightest bit.
And Brent Symonette himself.
Not a slightest bit.
All right, good deal. So you see yourself as a Bahamian, not a white Bahamian, but just a Bahamian.
I'm a Bahamian.
But
My
bottom line.
passport says Bahamian.
Right.
Matter of fact, I'm sort of, to some extent, offended that the political arms still bring up this
Race card.
boogeyman of the UBP.
Right.
You do your research. I think people should do their research. If you go down Bay Street, the first name that pops up in my head is Max Gibson, Alison Gibson's husband. He has a store on Bay Street.
Right. That's Colombian Emeralds?
Whatever it is, yeah.
Right.
Tiger Finlinson had a slew of stores on Bay Street.
Right.
All those perfume shops and jewelry shops and everything else, they're not owned by
White Bahamians.
Bay Street boys.
Right.
Matter of fact, a lot of Bay Street stores are not owned by those people. There are very few of the original Bay Street boys in the cabinet ministry, and there were cabinet ministers, who have children that are working here.
And to tell you the truth, I must
And
say,
I'm the one that is
You-
the
you-
most prominent. I'm everything
you
rolled
keep
up.
getting the blame.
I got the blame, but I don't mind.
Right.
I don't mind.
Right.
But if you look at it, Charlie Bethel, he does no children here. Mr. Dalbinas has a son, has children working here, but not necessarily in frontline politics. And you go to Safford Sands, does not. You go down that list of cabinet ministers from 64 to 67.
They're a thing of the past.
That's me.
Right. Right.
And in 67, I was 13.
And let me just
13. And Brave Davis wasn't much older
than you were at that
than
time.
I was, and he's telling what must have been history.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying everything was perfect.
Right.
No, it was far
Right.
from perfect.
Right.
Yes, we saw over time how there was the political parties only came into existence. The women got the right to vote. You got rid of the company vote. So the Bahamas was developing.
Right.
A reaction to the then PLP. But then you look against the background of the United States. There was, I had a dream. There was the bus controversy, the schooling controversy, all about the same time.
The world was evolving.
And the world was evolving.
So
So I think we need to look at Bahamian history in the context
Right.
of what was happening in the world.
So basically, you're almost saying that, in a way you're saying, or what I'm getting what you're saying, is that what the Bahamas was experiencing at that time, in those times, were not
has to be viewed
in
against what was
history and
happening
context,
in
in the world.
context of the world.
Now,
No question.
your father mightn't have been a racist. What about individuals in his camp at that time? The other members of parliament, were they prejudiced?
Some of them might have been. I didn't know them all that well to be able to say what.
Based on your opinion.
I think you'll find that the way business was done
Uh,
and the way things were reacted, I could see that being a label for some people, yes.
right. So how would you?
But they left.
What-
Don't
they
forget
left,
They
yes,
left.
yes.
So therefore, in
Yeah.
'67, there was an election. It was a close election. Then there was a followed by election where a lot of those persons left.
All
They
right.
either didn't run again, and that was the end of that era.
That era. And I think actually,
Now,
you,
I think one of the more interesting things that has to be, when the UBP left government, they were the last government in the Bahamas to leave money in the treasury.
right.
Left substantial money in the treasury.
Could you give
I
our
can't
listeners an
remember,
estimate?
it's
Yes, roughly.
16 million or
16 million,
whatever
okay.
it was. I can't remember
Okay.
exactly. So which Pinling, I'd like to use the word of Perry Christie when he talked about how easy it is to spend money, but
Right.
whatever that. And successive governments, and I'll say successive governments, managed to get us to this debt
Wow.
that we're in.
Wow.
Now, one of the things my old man did believe in was a balanced budget, so they never spent. Now, we talk about what's happened on the PLP, as if there was no roads in this country, no schools in this country. You take Government High School. Government High School produced some top scholars. Pinning himself.
Right.
What did PLP do? Disbanded it.
Well, we got to
So,
get
I
into
mean,
that.
at some point we have to look. Our history has been rewritten in interesting terms.
I don't even think it's written. Most of the history of the Bahamas is very oral, and the stories get distorted and segmented and
Well, history is his
exactly
story.
exactly. And the funny thing is, you really in the academic world, oral history is not really. We don't consider that as factual as possible because no one.
Unfortunately, a lot of us also we have in those days the Tribune and the Guardian.
Right.
You can read an article in the Tribune and the Guardian and know what happened in reality.
Right.
But when a person goes to do some research, where do they go? The archives of the Tribune and Guardian.
Right,
And that's
right.
gospel. And we
right.
have to remember that.
And who wrote it?
Who wrote it.
All right, but let's move. Actually, you took us into another question, which I would have asked you as we're moving along, which was, how do you feel about race back then and pre-independence and post-independence? I think we would have covered that. So the next question would be, do you feel that you carry the legacy burden of your father in politics today and in the past?
Yes and no. And
Okay.
I'm going to qualify. I think yes, there are a lot of people I run into. You mentioned some people might be listening
Right.
via the airwaves. I'm running into Edison Key, for instance, who worked for my father.
Right,
He talks very highly of my father.
Right.
He got his start in life with my father.
right,
The people we were talking about, I won't call their name.
Right.
Their father or grandfather worked.
Right.
So I ran into another boy in my constituency whose father worked for me, and he had. So yes, I carry a legacy of positive,
right,
and yes, I carry a legacy of negative. The negative is, I think, what political opponents try and throw on me.
right,
Now, something that I'm different at than probably a lot of people in politics. Every time I cause a chair to be given to a classroom, I don't take a picture and put it in the newspaper.
you just give it.
I do everything anonymously.
We're going to get to that.
So a lot of stuff, it was my own downside that I didn't put my picture in the newspaper. So
Okay.
for instance, Dr. Clark, my opponent, said he hasn't seen anything that I've done in St. Anne's.
And don't give that up yet because we're going to get to that. I want to keep this
I'm
conversation
pretend to
grounded.
answer
Yeah,
that
no,
too.
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. All right. There's a fear amongst black mulatto Bahamians and especially PLP politicians that you signify the UBP and that you will return the Bahamas to the days of the UBP. So let's just keep our answers in that context to just kill that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the things I believe in, and I believe strongly in, is that we all need to succeed.
Right.
And if we could find a way to put more Bahamians to work, I'd be the happiest man in the world. I don't want them necessarily to work for more FM.
Right.
I want them to go out and fund their own PR company or their own whatever.
So you're not a boogeyman.
I'm not you know what? People who work for me and they come in and say, boss, I'm thinking of leaving. I'm the first one to tell them I'll write the reference because I think you need to go and do what you want to do in your life. And that's the only way we're going to grow the Bahamas.
Awesome. Next
One
question.
step at a time.
Are you ashamed or apologetic for anything that your father would have done under the UBP or has done in his past? Are you ashamed or apologetic for
No.
anything?
No.
Even though some people said that your father and the party at that time would have held blacks from wanting to vote or stopped blacks from coming downtown and
That's
they blame them for everything negative
I never.
to blacks.
Oh, that's good. That's good. First of all, I never saw that side of my father. I always
Okay.
saw the opposite side.
Okay.
Now, at those times, don't forget we had umpteen hotel rooms open.
Right.
You could go down Bay Street, and there were umpteen bars. There were umpteen night. Tell me where we can find live Bahamian music in a hotel today.
I agree with you with that.
That has
You
been
can't
killed.
find it.
My old man didn't kill that.
Right.
The drum beat, the cat and fiddle, everything else going, da 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 da. Bahamian, well, no, I'll take back Bahamian.
Yeah, too early.
Too early. But you certainly had a number of nightclubs going.
But only for the black band player, not for the black citizen.
I don't recall persons not being able to go in those places. The drum beat or the cat and fiddle.
'Cause I've heard from,
No.
people
But-
would be in their 60s saying
but
during
the
that
point-
time
okay, the point I'm making-
we
okay.
couldn't get into hotels.
You certainly couldn't get in the movie houses,
Right.
which is totally wrong.
Right.
I totally
And you totally disagree with
totally
that.
disagree with that.
Okay.
But however, you can talk to people who in that age. There were cab drivers during the day
Mm-hmm.
and played in bands in the hotels at night.
Okay.
They're not playing in the hotels. So two things. One, our local culture has gone down the tube.
I agree with you with that.
And that
You
comes,
go down
as
Bay
far
Street
as I'm
today, you hear
concerned, the
Cuban
blame
music
of that
and
is
American
on
music.
Clement Maynard and the PLP when they allowed cruise ships to open their restaurants and bars while in port to deal with numbers as opposed to quality of tourism. Full stop.
And I totally agree with you that.
So
I think why is your import, you should
look,
shut down.
Let's look at the blame
Right.
and put the blame where it is.
Not a UBP blame, but a PLP
You know,
blame.
I know I spent
Clement
a lot of time
Maynard.
growing up in my youth in Eleuthera.
Uh-huh.
The roads in Eleuthera were darn good. But when the PLP took over, every year in South Eleuthera, the roads had to be repaved again.
Wow.
Every year, every 5 years.
All right.
So, I mean, let's not blame, let's look at the blame where the blame really is.
I'm not allowing you to tell me that,
Yeah.
because you're a walking
So,
history book.
When,
So
when we get at this particular moment, remember when we only had one TV station?
ZNS.
ZNS played Roots every election.
Right.
That was offensive.
And the funny thing
It was
is, Brent,
subliminal.
the funny thing is that we've been governed by black leaders for the last 40-something years. So
Let's ask the
stop blaming the white man.
Ask the first Pinling administration, have they really enhanced the life of Bahamians from 1967 to 1992? Let's look. You know, they talk about College of the Bahamas. These are institutional things that have grown. Initiative with all the Defence Force boats. Damon Shipyard were chosen to build those boats during the F&M administration. We left that on the table.
Right.
So don't put in one of their key points that was something they did.
Yeah,
But that's the one they spent the VAT money on that they borrowed.
Right.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, Dr. Brennan Nottage is definitely taking.
And talk about smoke and mirrors. Mr. Roberts talk about smoke and mirrors. Come out from the smoke and mirrors and let's talk sense.
I totally agree with you there. All right, well, moving on. A symbol of well, anyway, we're done with that area there. Let's move on to the next question here. How close were your ties to the U.S. Embassy when you let's say probably in the second F&M administration?
Second F&M administrator. First F&M administrator. I was both Attorney General and Minister of Tourism.
Tourism, right?
The second one I was Foreign Affairs, which obviously by itself had very close links.
Uh-huh.
So while I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, just to put it in a round, I dealt with Castro, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Britain, any of the Chinese. We opened up an embassy in China. Don't forget that the F&M put a resident ambassador in China.
Right.
We opened the embassy up. We changed from the Taiwan to China policy. So it's the job of the Minister of Foreign Affairs is to make sure the foreign affairs of the country are developed, controlled, regulated, whichever word you want to use. In my personal opinion, the current Minister of Foreign Affairs has gone probably too far the other way.
Yeah, he's based on the research. They've painted a picture of you as a nationalist, where you were good for the U.S. and you're good for the Bahamas. At that time, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, were these initiatives your vision to open that embassy in China and do all the things you did, or these were the vision of the party?
This was a vision of the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, okay.
Hubert Ingraham.
Okay.
No question about that.
Okay.
We had other initiatives. For instance, one of the things we were able to do that I'll give Mr. Mitchell credit. He started, but we closed the deal. Was the abolition of Bahamians needing a Schengen visa to go to Europe.
Right.
Made it easier for a lot of us to travel. And we opened up a number of areas where we could have less visas. So therefore, there are in some cases, well, I'll give Mr. Mitchell credit for another thing since I based it in a little bit earlier. We inherited he introduced the original passport and immigration system. So for instance, he bought the program, but my passport number is number 1.
Right.
Because
Your passport number 1?
Number 1, 6 zeros and a 1. Because mine was the first passport to come off the line on December the 7th, 2000, and 7,
Right.
because that's the way it goes.
Right.
But I was also able to reduce the deadline, the length of time you needed for a passport from weeks. You know, before that, everyone was screaming and hollering.
Right.
Then Mr. Mitchell gets there and he brings in a $200 fee to expedite passports because he just was not able to produce passports.
When it should have been just on the efficiency of
We
the
were down
workers.
to 2 weeks or
Right.
less than 10%. Then you fast forward to a comment he made the other day. He was saying that the question about certain nationalities being given citizenship in order to vote, it's very simple. Go to that same computer he installed and push the button and tell us how many persons were nationalized during his time at the wheel. He
Right.
asked me the same question in Parliament and I replied to him.
Right.
So very easy. Just go month by month. The computer will spit it out at the push of a button. How many people, instead of saying, you know, defamation and smokescreen, which is
Right,
typical of
right,
Fred
right.
Mitchell, just publish the list. How many people did you nationalize? What nationalities? And where do they live?
Very, very, very.
Very simple. Mr.
very-
Mitchell's a clever guy. He
Very
knows how to do it.
straightforward.
Just, and then put the lie to rest.
Moving on. The U.S. Embassy in some declassified files stated that Prime Minister Ewan Ingram tapped Free National Movement FNM Deputy Party Leader Brent Symonette as the Bahamas' new Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs on May 4th. Symonette is a successful businessman and a former Attorney General and Minister of Tourism in the previous FNM government. The appointment of Symonette, a good friend of the U.S. Embassy with excellent ties to the embassy leadership, a sign of Prime Minister Ingram's commitment to a close and productive U.S. relationship. Symonette, whose father was pre-independence premier of the Bahamas, is one of a handful of Bahamians who have remained engaged in post-independence Bahamian politics. Symonette is pragmatic, a no-nonsense leader with limited tolerance for inefficiency. We can expect him to be a strong partner for the U.S., who will move decisive and more inclined support to the U.S. positions other than his predecessor, which is Fred Mitchell. He will almost certainly focus less on relationship with Cuba, and he will be less engaged in CARICOM and non-aligned movement that of Fred Mitchell. At the same time, Symonette is a strong Bahamian nationalist who will jealously be protective of Bahamian economic trade and business. How factual is that?
Pretty factual. I have very little tolerance for lack of progress. If you're supposed to do a job, do the job or move out the way.
Right.
That's the way I operate. So, am I totally... No, that doesn't mean the U.S. will get everything they want. Talking about, I've dealt with Cuba. Matter of fact, it was under the FNM administration and under my time there that we established the maritime boundaries between Cuba and the Bahamas. A great team in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the AG's office, and a great team in the Cuban side.
Right.
And the Cuban foreign minister and I met on several occasions, and we established where that boundary is. There's
Right.
a fine line, drawn in the sand, registered at the UN, and everything. So that doesn't say that we don't deal with Cuba, or Venezuela, or CARICOM, because CARICOM are also part of our... But we also, certainly on my time under Mr. Ingram, we balanced what we needed for the Bahamas as opposed to, a carte blanche. This morning's paper, 42% of the hotel rooms in the Bahamas are owned, major hotel rooms, are owned by the Chinese. We have to look at that.
Yes, we do, and we're definitely...
Is the tail wagging the dog or the
We're definitely coming to that because I've been saying that on the radio for a while that you don't want the Chinese to own a major share in your
but I don't want to
tourism
get
product.
sidetracked. We have to make sure we have a balanced look.
Actually.
In other words, when you're dealing with foreign affairs, not every single initiative by the United States and not every single initiative by Cuba or China should be turned down because they are purely United States or China.
As we're about to go to the break, why does the U.S. Embassy continue to single out Fred Mitchell and paint him in a negative picture and paint you in a positive picture?
Maybe that's the way they view the two of us.
All right. Which one do you think is better for the Bahamas, you or Fred Mitchell?
Brent Symonette. No.
Okay. We'll be right back after this break. Got Brent Symonette in the studio. We're going to run down and get some more of these questions answered. All right, Mr. Symonette here. Symonette has been openly critical of Bahamian political participation in free trade agreements, saying, "I'm nervous about the pressure being brought on the Bahamas to join various trade groups." Why, and is this your same view today?
You know, a number of the free trade agreements are not necessarily beneficial to the Bahamas because we're not an exporter of a large percentage of goods.
Do you export anything?
Crawfish.
Why do you export crawfish when you don't have a surplus in this country? Does that make any sense?
Well, you see this morning's paper, one of the businesses wants to export live crawfish to China.
Why?
That's a business. You make money.
Yeah, but
Was it now? What is beneficial to the? That's a different.
let's talk about the benefits.
Now, for instance, conch.
Right.
It is getting harder and harder for us to get conch. Maybe we shouldn't export it. But that's going to then offend a number of persons who are in that business. That's a discussion we have to have.
Let's have the discussion. Who cares who it? The thing is, in this country, I think you have a big problem with business etiquette. We always worry about what business is going to offend. Why should the Bahamas export anything? This is simple economics that you don't have a surplus in at the cost of Bahamians paying a higher price locally. What sense does that make? You're a businessman.
Yeah.
What sense does that make?
But we also we don't grow chicken, for instance.
Right.
Because it's cheaper to import chicken. In some cases, countries like Haiti don't grow rice because it's cheaper or potatoes. And that's where we have a serious problem. We need to find a way in the future, and maybe they tried it with Bamsey before the building burnt up.
It's called a competitive advantage.
It wasn't insured, and
Right.
we wasted a lot of money. Maybe we have to now create a educational system or a culture, whichever one we want to call it, where Bahamians are not afraid of farming. For instance, if I didn't go back, my wife and I toyed with the idea of growing pineapple.
Right.
You get $6 odd, whatever you get for a pineapple. Pineapple takes 2 square feet, and there's so many You multiply 45,000 square feet per acre, you get a huge sum of money.
Right.
But you're got to go and get your hands dirty.
But let's go back to the
But
meat.
it's still good money.
Yeah, but let's go back to the meat of the conversation. Now, we need to figure out in the Bahamas what's our competitive advantage when we talk
Our
academic talk.
competitive advantage is tourism, financial services.
But that can't be it.
We also talk about diversifying the economy.
Right.
When we start to talk about diversifying the economy, we have to make the economy, and by that I mean the ease of doing business. You've got to make it easier to do business. It's very difficult in this country to do business.
So my callers get a good understanding on the question I posed to you initially. Why are we exporting things we don't have a surplus on?
Because it's
In your opinion.
it adds to your balance of payments surplus, and you get earning foreign currency. It is a businessman, for instance, Mr. Pritchard is applying to make it so he can make a couple of dollars off of selling the crawfish. We have to have that discussion. I'm not sure we're ready for that yet. But we have to look at, for instance, whether it's the National Trust, whether it's Brief, whether it's the Nature Conservancy, whichever one of those agencies.
Right.
Why, if we can't get conch,
Right.
you're quite right, why, which is a Bahamian
Delicacy. Cuisine. Yeah.
why should we be exporting?
So if
But
you have anything
the
to do,
the fishermen will be upset with me for saying that.
yeah,
because
but we
that's their
listen,
livelihood.
yeah, but we can't listen, Brent. At the cost of local Bahamians paying an expensive markup because these guys are exporting. You think that's right?
I think we need to look at it.
You being a part of the next F&M government, how would you address this situation?
We'd look at it. We'd investigate like we did with the fishing. You talk to the fishermen, and then remember we started a closed season for the grouper,
Right.
which is a way of preserving the aggregation when it was their season, and have a balanced approach. Not this. The way they did the fly fishing regulations, the PLP, I think was totally out to lunch. I think because there's a tremendous number of people come here to fly fish, and they have to have a guide on a boat or whatever the regulations is. When you're in the middle of Cat Island or Crooked Island, or that makes things either expensive, difficult, or a person just goes to Cuba or goes somewhere else. And that's what we have to balance.
Okay.
We have to balance the protection of Bahamian employment against the economic benefit for the country.
All right, moving on. You mentioned one time in the past, I think we're running into dangerous waters unless someone can convince me otherwise. We're not going to collect in VAT what we are currently collecting in import tax. Is this your position still? Is VAT good for the Bahamas or not?
I think there was a lot of apprehension to the introduction of VAT. Possibly, I think actually, when we transferred into VAT, it was a fairly smooth transaction from import duties. I don't think we've finished that transaction yet. Yeah, I think the idea is that customs duties should continue to come down, and we then turn into a VAT economy, not a customs. That would help businesses a lot, so you don't have to fill out a customs form.
Right.
Then you have to have VAT on top of freight, on top of customs duty, and top.
Exactly. So do you think, in your opinion, VAT was ruled properly? I think VAT,
I think
the introduction of VAT has caused the consumer an additional 21%.
Yes and yes. There was no question that we had to introduce a tax that had a wider tax base in order to deal with the financial situation in the Bahamas. Don't forget, VAT was rolled out initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, was a tax to reduce the national debt.
Exactly.
A tax to reduce the national debt.
And the projection was so low initially.
Doesn't matter. What's happening now is the political party in power are changing that from debt to deficit. And they say, well, any idiot can see that 25 cents in the dollar goes towards whatever. And that was so asinine a comment. The debt has not come down.
Right.
So the purpose that VAT was put on Bahamians' backs isn't there.
Right.
You just have to look around at the moment and see contracts that are being. I mean, I saw a bulldozer on Fox Hill Park last night.
Right.
I mean, creating a dust storm, chopping all the trees in Fox Hill Park.
Wow.
For what? It makes you believe. And I just use Fox Hill Park because I happened to go through there at 8 o'clock last night. That is a political patronage at its highest.
Right.
Every political party uses sidewalks, but I mean, it's the extent to which you do that. So if our national debt is going up, if our GDP ratio is now 80-odd%, this government, and that's, you come back over the reason why I came back to Parliament. My actual comment was, if Mr. Christie continues to mess up the economy of the Bahamas, I will come back to frontline politics.
All right. Moving on.
And he continues to mess up the economy.
And that's the reason why you're here.
Not for me.
For the country.
But for every Bahamian here, so that we and our children, because my children only have one passport. I only have one passport.
So you're not a Canadian citizen, is what you continue to say.
People
People have said that. Your mother's Bahamian.
My mother was Bahamian. My mother was naturalized Bahamian.
Naturalized Bahamian, who is...
Just like Clement Maynard's wife.
Who is a Canadian.
And Brave Davis's wife.
So let me ask you something.
Just like Brave
Davis.
Davis.
Yeah, we can get him out. We can get him out there.
Let's call some other names.
Right, we can get him out there. So
and Mr. Hannah's wife.
Right, so based on the fact that your mother is a Canadian citizen, you would have derived...
No, I could have applied. I could have possibly. I never did.
Let me ask you a question. You would have derived citizenship to derivative through bloodline because your mother is a Canadian.
No, because my mother gave up her Canadian citizenship.
Oh, she gave it up.
She gave it up when she was sworn in as a Bahamian. So when she became a Bahamian, she only had one passport, not the Bahamas passport.
Okay, so for everybody saying out there that you're a Canadian citizen, you're not.
And I think time would have passed that I could have applied. And I have no intention of applying.
Brave Davis' wife's an American, is what you said.
No, I didn't say that.
Where's his wife?
She's Trinidadian.
You call some other foreign people off. Call them again.
Clement Maynard's wife was nationalized just a few days before my mother.
Okay.
Lady Hannah's wife, and the list goes on.
And the list goes on. All right, so you're not the only one.
My mother is not, but my mother became a Bahamian. So when I was born, my mother and my father both carried Bahamian passports.
Okay, we're going to move on from there. Symonette has been a vocal supporter of free press and human rights, and Post believes that he will generally offer more consistent support for U.S. position on human rights issues internationally. Is this a true assumption of you when it comes to free press?
I believe in the free press.
If you do, and you're a lawyer, you were also Attorney General at one time, why do we still have criminal libel and criminal slander on the books?
Why do we still have the death penalty?
Let's talk about criminal libel and slander because it impedes on the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech. Why?
Yes. Possibly because under the AG's office, the law reform doesn't move as fast as it should do. There are a lot of laws.
But you were there for 5 years. Why you didn't get rid of it?
Guilty as charged.
Why you didn't get rid of it?
We were doing a lot of other things. We were doing the financial systems where we had to do a lot of the agreements.
I know, but I don't want to stray off too far. I'm just saying
we listed priorities.
Yeah, but
those weren't a priority.
Let's stick to the one question: why you didn't get rid of criminal libel and slander?
It was not
a priority to you.
It was not the priority when you weighed the other issues that are there.
Do you think criminal slander and libel is a problem today in the Bahamas?
I
It keeps
think the
people
whole
silent.
question of defamation and slander is a serious problem.
If you're elected again and you're back in there, would you get rid of it? Would you get rid of these old laws? Because
Yeah, I think
the-
yes. I think
Good.
what we do. I think what we need to do is we need to modernize our legislature. You know, which is very interesting.
and
The FNM, the
Right.
FNM passed the Freedom of Information Act
right,
before they lost government.
right,
It was due. It was a clause in there to come into effect on a day appointed.
right.
5 years later,
They're still
the
working on
the PLP did the same thing.
it. Right,
Prorogued Parliament without passing the act.
right,
The act is not in effect.
right.
That was a crime. The Freedom of Information Act should come into effect, not so that you guys can write in, subject to national security and other
Right.
and be able. Why shouldn't the press know that? Well, I'm not even going to say about the Bahama documents. I won't even go there.
We're
Because
gonna hit that.
why shouldn't they know who got the contract for the new post office? Let's just say the new post office.
Right.
How much was it let for?
Mm-hmm.
Who was the owner? These are because I think it would impact Bahamians to know that their tax dollars are going to a select few persons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cronyism.
Right. Now, listen. You strike me as a intelligent individual. You're slightly political science / law. You're a lawyer, successful businessman, former attorney general, and all the posts you have held. In this country, people are silenced, and every time I hear people call in, intimidated, and I hear them called in, and it's, oh, you can't talk about that because it's before the court. I think that's stupid, first of all. Also, you can't call this one name, you can't call that one name. If you're going to hold people feet to the fire...
Yeah, but I think there's a difference.
Tell me the difference, please.
I think there's a difference when I notice some callers,
Right,
and especially on social media,
right.
there is a line that has to be drawn.
And what is that line?
I don't think you can, for instance, go totally way out of whack and call people by some crazy names.
Right,
Real derogatory names. There has to be some degree of basis of this allegation. You shouldn't be impeded.
right. The test that was used, that was passed down by the U.S. Supreme Court, is called the clear and present danger test, which says your freedom will be limited if what you say creates a clear and present danger to the individual. If I call Brent Symonette a scumbag that works over here and there, what you going to sue me for? I should have the right to say that.
Right.
I should have the right to say some bank out there is doing bad practices by charging all these ridiculous fees.
Correct.
Why should I be concerned, and why should media be concerned of you coming after me?
Correct.
It's not a free press.
Correct.
So we prance and we laugh. Oh yeah, we're the Guardian and we're the Tribune and we can publish. I've read those articles, and let me tell you something. They're very biased, and a lot of them are very tainted, because you could see how the words they use and the way it's written is so controlled.
One very simple thing is, I will not advertise with you if you are derogatory about me.
But that's okay. That's your right as
No,
a businessman.
But
what I'm saying
depends
is-
who's saying that.
Well, no, you have that
No.
right.
No, but the government has a very large budget for
Right.
advertising.
Right. And the government should not own ZNS.
Totally agree with you.
So if we're
But
going to
who-
get...
But who liberalized the airwaves? Ingram.
Well, the
So there's no question that we're having this conversation not because of something the PLP did,
Exactly,
but
but
something the FNM did.
and this is why, if Brent gets in, we have to take the mantle further, get rid of these two laws. Do you agree we should get rid of them or no?
There's a lot of laws we have to get rid of. I'm not going to say here that it'll be the first thing on my agenda, because that's what you want me to say.
I don't want you to say that. I want you to say what you want to say.
I'm going to say what I think if and when
Uh-huh.
the FNM are elected, well, on May 10th,
Right.
now we know the day.
Now we know the day.
Now that we know the day. If the FNM are elected the government of the day,
Right.
and if I form part of that administration,
Right.
which are two, it's
Very high percentage, but keep
yeah.
going.
The first priority of the day,
Right.
in my opinion, is to look at the financial stability of the
Right.
country.
And be honest with me. Be honest with me. criminal libel and slander is not even
but-
on, it's not even on your books. It's not even a part of your manifesto. I'm just pushing this to you.
That's your agenda.
Yeah, no, I don't have no agenda.
There's a lot of other issues that I'm sorry that we didn't push.
And we're going to get into
Yeah.
those also.
But I think the prime objective of the F&M government
Right.
on May the 12th,
Right.
after the recount,
is to look at the finances.
is to look at the finances of this country, the tax system in this country, and do a deep audit
Right.
of if some of these allegations we're hearing coming out are true. If there's been skullduggery,
Right.
someone should pay.
Pay in what way? You're going to put them to jail? You're going to send them to jail?
It should be brought forward, investigated.
So you should be AG again then? Because we need you to put them to jail.
I'm not looking for a post in the government.
But
I'm looking for the government
But
to
if
be
you,
formed
but
by
if
the
you're not,
government.
now we know how this thing works, Brent. And don't lawyer me right now. If you're not a member of the parliament or if you're not a cabinet minister, if you're not you can't do nothing.
That's not correct. That's not correct. I could, for instance,
You could take a bill to parliament. You could do whatever you want. But if you ain't,
but Parliament is not 9/10 of running this country.
well,
I'm a great believer. In some cases, you don't need to pass new laws.
no, you just
need to
enhance the ones you got and
just
fix
need
them.
to enforce
Yeah.
some of them. We have I think when I last asked Mr. Christie, some $300 million of outstanding real property tax.
Collect that.
The day they increased the real property tax,
Right.
and before 12 o'clock that day, the inspector was knocking on my door.
To collect yours.
Same day.
For
My
yours.
door. My real property tax out east has
Right.
been gone up like 3 or 4 times since I've been a member of government.
And that's because it's you.
and no one else has. So I don't mind. If it's me, it's me. Fine.
I'm just saying, they only came to you.
But
all these other people.
300 million. Go collect it.
Right. The Governor General owed all that money before she became Governor General. But they came
Now,
to you
in interest
for your
of-
money.
Because I know someone's listening who'll call in.
Right.
Both governments didn't do it.
Both governments didn't do it. Gotcha.
And both governments are guilty of certain things. Go collect our taxes.
Let me end this segment of this question.
And
What
we
is
might not need any new taxes.
good point? What is this position on? Because they said they applauded you as a big human rights individual. When you were Minister of Foreign Affairs, why didn't you solve the immigration backlog?
We did a heck of an indent to it.
Percentage.
I don't know. Fred Mitchell asked the question. We actually nationalized a great number of people. One of the things I know for a fact we brought down, some people waited 20 years
Wow,
to get a spousal permit.
that's crazy.
We were issuing those before they hit the 5 years.
Wow.
We brought that backlog down. We brought a lot of work permit backlogs down. So I know for a fact when I was there, we brought a lot of that backlog down. But what I think a lot of Bahamians don't realize, and we get a little bit edgy on this subject,
Right.
there are a lot of persons in this country who need to be regularized.
I totally
And
agree
I
with
think
you.
this is a subject too that at some point has to come out and be full and center of a debate.
If the F&M wins the next government, will you guys deal with these issues, something like this, and in year 1 and not in year 5? Because I think year
I'm a
5 is
believer in year
horrible.
one. I'm a believer.
Year 1, exactly.
Sorry, you and I come from political science.
Right.
You do all that stuff you have to do
Right.
the first year.
The first year. Why
Because-
wait till year 5 and make
No,
it political?
But that's the you watch now.
Right.
What's being done in this last year could have been done a long time ago.
And that draws the line of discretion. Was it ethically done? Because you wait until year 5.
Was it politically motivated?
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
During an election.
Exactly.
And Keith Bell says, "Give me 5 more years to solve the crime."
Too
Murder has gone up. Mr. Christie says this morning, a fair respect your opponent. I hope he holds his people, because he's so weak in that department.
Right. Right.
You know, he holds his people to that line when they start throwing the rock.
I couldn't agree
Here
with you more.
was a political party that posts the murder rate on Saunders Beach and other roundabouts, and now has a murder rate way out of line, and they want to be given 5 more years
To fix the murder-
fix
to fix
it.
the crime
They've had
problem.
5 years to fix it. It's time for them to move out the way.
Symonette, Mr. Symonette, they also said that you were a strong supporter of the counter drugs and the migration interdiction programs during the time that you held office. What's your take on legalizing recreational and medical marijuana to avoid so many youths from smoking a joint getting locked up?
One of the things when I was AG, we did a number of. I probably, I'm going to bring up a subject. this issue of nullies, which the AG has an ability to do. I nullied thousands of cases when I was there. Guy stole a candy bar from Super Value. A guy with a joint on a cruise ship. When I read in the newspaper that we go on cruise ships and pull a tourist off a cruise ship for a couple of joints, I see red, I gotta admit.
Yeah, that makes no
Because
sense.
let him depart 8 hours from now
Right.
and go about his business.
Right, hit him with a little small fee that he could pay
Don't
on the
even hit
spot.
him, just say, look,
Just let him go.
please don't do that around,
Right.
intention to supply and selling, that's a different animal.
Right, right.
But if you go to a party or you go to one of the places at Fish Fry and someone's smoking a joint, come guys.
So let me just expand to the
medical
public.
marijuana, I would support.
You would support?
I think because if people have cancer and other reasons, because yes.
What about recreational use? The guy that's just smoking a joint.
the guy with a joint at Arawak Key? We shouldn't throw the book at him.
Right.
10 pounds, 6 pounds, 5.
Exactly.
Intention
Exactly.
to supply.
Exactly.
Because, and one reason, and people might be horrified by that, I think we have enough other issues
To deal with.
to deal with. Like this morning, I was standing at a stop sign, and CM5 just goes through a red light.
Mm-hmm.
That's more important.
Who's CM5?
I don't know who CM5
Oh,
is.
okay. Mr. What's his name is? Mr. Greenslade, please find CM5 and have him and get him a red light ticket.
6:55 this morning.
6:55 this morning. CM5.
But so I think we have to prioritize, because the court system is, I remember once asking, there were 22, give a good example. A friend of mine gets a house broken into. He
Right.
goes to report the crime. They pull it up and they say, oh, there's a warrant out for your arrest.
For the
his
guy that's
arrest,
reporting the
He was
crime.
reporting the crime
Right.
because he hadn't paid a seatbelt fine.
Wow.
Somehow, 4 years ago, somehow he'd saved the seatbelt,
Ticket.
the receipt,
Yeah.
and was able to produce it. But they
Wow.
were more interested in his warrant for arrest
Versus
than
the
fact
bur- the
that
burglary.
the house had been broken into. And that's where I really start to see, because at some point, some of this bureaucracy that we have has to be done so that type of thing doesn't happen. And the same appears in the courts. We need to move, you guys...
We're getting into that. Let me give you that other question. Sorry about that. During your time as Attorney General, is the Attorney General office just a rubber stamping rule, or did you have the flexibility to carry out the law? Because in that capacity, you considered to be the highest law enforcement official in the country. You represent the government, and you are the guy that hits the axe. Were you able to do what you wanted to do? Prosecute beyond a reasonable doubt?
I certainly never interfered in whatever prosecution the police department went on.
Right.
I did nolly, I think, 1 or 2 criminal cases,
Right.
which were done in the interest that the evidence was not there. We did deal with some cases of rape that were
Right.
very sensitive, and I think you have a humane side. Yes, no. For instance, the director of public prosecution should be an independent person.
Right.
There's no question about
Independent, elected, or appointed?
that. I think you have to have probably appointed.
Let's say nominated. It's a better word.
Well,
like
no,
nominated.
elected, then you become popular,
No,
which might not mean
when I
you're-
said nominated, the prime minister could nominate, but should go through a ratification process of both parties.
No.
You don't think you'll never get
because
approved?
I don't- well, if we didn't have a U.S. ambassador for 5 years here.
Right.
We still don't have one.
Right.
Because the Senate couldn't approve, and the nominee ended up. I think she.
Well, the prime minister right now appoints everybody. Do you want that same problem again, or just make
No,
it be
but I'm
elected?
thinking, a prime minister appointing an ambassador to Norway doesn't make. That's a different thing than
Right,
actually
right.
a person who instigates public prosecution. So, for
Right.
instance, let's say a cabinet minister goes amok of the law
Right.
somewhere and does something. That shouldn't be up to one of his colleagues that sit around the table with him to
Right.
prosecute him for whatever crime he's alleged to have done.
So how do we give the independent person
a lot
teeth?
of countries have independent director of public prosecution
Elected or
appointed.
appointed? And you think this person now, if we appoint him, should
But you can appoint them
with
like the
protection of
commissioner of
tenure?
police, like the commissioner of police with
Right.
5 years, or 5 years with another 5 years with whatever,
Right.
an option for another
Right.
2.
Right.
That option may be at the discretion of the bureaucracy.
Right.
But the appointment, there's no fear of being fired.
But you don't think an elected one will work?
I'm nervous at electing someone like that, because when you get popularity and
They
you
just
have-
prosecute
and-
everybody?
and you have, well, it should be, you should be
That's
free
what
to-
you want, right?
You should be free to prosecute without worrying about getting elected 5 years from now.
Right, because if the guy is still appointed, he could still fall under the pressure of the PM.
I think we also have to get beyond some of that. You've got persons appointed who've done a very good job. They
Right.
might have been politically not the same party, but
Right.
I think we have to mature beyond that.
We're about to take this break. When we use Nolly in the Bahamas, a lot of people during this 5 years with the current AG sees Nolly as a bad thing. But Nolly, as a criminal justice person who teaches criminal justice, we say plea bargain abroad. Because,
No, it's a different thing.
well, Nolly is when you get rid of the case based on the evidence. But the power of the AG can do plea bargaining,
Yes.
which is the same process as getting rid of case based on the evidence without saying it. Follow me on this.
Yeah.
Without pushing it through the process. Without the police officer arrests someone, they present their case, the AG looks at it, this case is too weak. Plea bargain. Do you want to...
Yes.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, but different thing is, Nolly is taking rid of the case altogether with the right to bring it back.
Right.
Now, for instance, where Nolly gets its bad words is the substantive minister, the AG, is out of the country,
Right.
and the acting AG
Did a Nolly on her behalf.
does a Nolly. I don't know if it's on her behalf. I don't know.
Well, she's the AG. It has to be on her behalf.
But does it? No, but he does it when he's acting minister. That's something you wait for the AG to come back.
Right, right,
There's no-
right. So an acting AG shouldn't do a Nolly.
An acting minister, in my opinion, should be very careful of what he does when the
Right.
substantive minister is away, because he's not fully embraced or informed about the case.
Well-
And that's where the plea bargaining system was a way of speeding up the
Speeding-
court.
it's speeding up
so
the
in other words,
system,
if you can't
exactly.
get him for murder, let's see if we can get him for grievous bodily harm,
Right.
or something like that, which achieves the same
Same outcome.
criminal outcome
Right.
without having to.
But it just expedite the cases across the board. We'll be right back after these breaks. Because I think here they push too many cases through the system. Welcome back to Real Talk Live. I'm going to open the phone lines now as we get into the hot part of this interview. You guys can call us in as 341-6673, 341-6673, and you can direct your questions directly at Mr. Brent Symonette if you want. Mr. Symonette, at this time in your life, and at this time on the eve of your last retirement, when you said in 2012 where you walked away from politics, what do you want now? Why should the Bahamian public listen to you now? Or what do you want now at this moment in your life?
Well, first of all, I said during the 5 years that I was not in frontline politics that and I repeat myself, should Mr. Christie continue to mess up the economy of the Bahamas, I was going to come back.
Okay.
I still believe that. I keep repeating that. The economy of the Bahamas is spiraling downhill very quickly. National debt's gone up. We've been downgraded to junk status. Our tax system is in a mess. And Mr. Christie, the fault lies at the feet of the Prime Minister.
Okay.
Because that being the case, I came back to active politics. Now, the PLP have been running some very nasty ads about greed and all this other issue. When I was Deputy Prime Minister, and I could do this. I'm not running away from that. I had independent income. 100% of my salary went in my St. Anne's account.
Okay.
And was spent in the constituency of St. Anne's, building parks, putting up road signs. I had a crew of people that went around filling potholes, made sure street lights worked, and so on and so forth. So therefore, St. Anne's, well, it was Montague before that, and St. Anne's when I was Deputy Prime Minister. All of those issues were dealt with out of my parliamentary allowance and my parliamentary salary. And at one point, don't forget, the F&M had a system in that the candidates all got a certain, it was $100,000 or $50,000 for constituency allowance. So a lot of that was used in that area. So this is not about anything for me. This is about for Bahamians and future generations. So we have a country that moves forward and does not continue to go downhill with the way the current administration is taking.
Awesome. So for that entire 5 years, you gave all your salary back.
Never.
Almost $1 million roughly. You figured with $100,000 plus your salary as a cabinet minister, about $200,000 a year. No?
Yeah, but close to $100,000 a year for 5 years.
For 5 years,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
That's pretty.
It wasn't 100,000 5 years. I think we reduced it to
50,000. All right.
at one point.
Before we take this next call, to set the record straight, in 2012, did you resign from politics, or the night of nomination, did Prime Minister Ingram tell you, Brent, you got to sit this one out? Just clear the record on that.
No, I told Prime Minister Ingram almost the second day in government that I would not be running in the next election.
So
5 years before I did.
5 years prior, you
Yes,
told him.
yes,
So
yes.
so this rumor that.
And his response was, "Do not keep that between the two of us.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll be a lame duck for the next 5 years."
So the fact that that people saw that there was some falling out between you two.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay, perfect. We can dismiss this.
Hubert Ingram and I, he asked me, he made an attempt to see if I would run again, but he knew me well enough, and I said no.
One more question before we take this call. We got, 2 callers on the line? Based on that rumor, there was a speculation that because you were mad, because he did not run you, that you supported the DNA financially in 2012.
Absolute lie.
Awesome.
Absolute lie. Mr. Ingram was one of the best prime ministers. Yes, we had our disagreements, but we always agreed on policy, and we had heated discussions at times, agreed 190% of the time, and we both had a lot of views in common.
Never supported the DNA.
Never. Actually, there's a wonderful rumor going around at the moment.
Well, we're going to get that. That's what the PLP.
You know, the lady came, I think it was the mother of the candidate came into my office and said, "I've heard a rumor that you want to support my daughter." I said,
Right.
"I hear she's a very nice woman.
Right.
I wish her luck. Absolutely no way in you-know-what
Right.
that the DNA are going to get a penny out of me for her, Brown, McCartney, or any of their candidates."
All right. We're going to take these calls brought to you live from BTC. Morning caller, you're live. Good. In the essence of time, let's run with your questions, sir.
Okay, 2 questions. Mr. Symonette, once you get into the election pass and you get into the House, and would you advocate for the persons, the previous government? Would you advocate for an audit of
I think the Bahamian public are entitled to know, in the light of what did the Tribune say the other day, $191 million that's gone missing, that where that money went, who was responsible for that money, and in the event that it was criminal or negligent, appropriate action should result therefrom. I don't think we should go on a witch hunt, a umpteen, what do you call them, commissions of inquiry, but I think there needs to be a, what do the accountants call it, forensic audit of where this money went for all Bahamians to know.
Go ahead, caller, with your next question.
The next question would be the Nolly hitting steps to
Mhm.
announce it. Would those be investigated or looked over? That were done in the last.
You know, a nulli is something the AG has in their sole prerogative. I think the high-profile ones, probably an independent person should look at, just for clearing up the record. Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, caller. Now, before we take the next call, now he mentioned looking into the Nolly. Once the state makes a decision, a legal decision to say we're dropping the case, you can't open that case
Yes,
again.
you can. Yes, you can.
In the Bahamas, you
Yes.
could.
A nolly only stops the case, and that's why I use that with a particular murder case, because something went wrong in the process
Right.
of the trial. A nolly can allow for the trial to be reopened.
After how long?
I don't think there's a limit. I'd have to look at that. But the idea is that you don't go to trial and get an acquittal, which would mean you couldn't prosecute.
Right.
So,
So,
in a lot of cases, a nolly is used. You can open back the case.
so in
back.
this jurisdiction, the state could pass a Nolly and said there's not
The
enough
AG can
evidence.
sign a
The
Nolly.
AG, it's not enough evidence to prosecute.
And subsequent information becomes available, and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's the attachment to it.
No, I'm just saying. No, I mean,
So if I bought a murder case and you guys decide to give me a Nolly, and I said, all right, well I kind of you don't have enough evidence, I'm going to jump on a plane and take off.
yes, that could happen. But what I'm saying, it doesn't slam the lid on the case.
Oh wow, interesting. It's a new one for me. BTC brought to you live. Call you live.
Good morning, Mr. Tinker.
Morning, sir.
Mr. Symonette.
Morning.
Brent, I noticed that you're not doing the, remember, you'll be serving as the Prime Minister of British, right?
Yes, sir.
If you want you to serve in his cabinet, so you cannot give a definite term, but I will be in charge. If he allows you to be in his cabinet, so don't say that no more, like, I'll be there for sure.
I didn't say that. I didn't say. I said if I am a member of cabinet.
Really? You didn't say that?
That's what I said.
I did not hear that. Anyhow, I'm the question.
Well, I'll repeat it again for you. It's the Prime Minister's discretion as to who he has in his cabinet. Yes.
He sets the agenda. What he will do.
Yes.
5 years.
Yes.
Nobody else.
Yes.
Okay. Getting back to this, you trouble me. This port deal. I got Saudi 11. One pallet cost me $120 coming from Miami. The UPP people we've been heading the port for the last 70 years and getting more than $1 billion off the port. Why the England government put them back in charge? And ACL going, G&G going, Seaboard Marine going. The poor man suffering. One pallet now, $400.
Seaboard, from my memory, went before the port was done. That one I know for a fact. And a lot of those ships leaving were as a result of consolidation of shipping agreements throughout the Caribbean. Nothing to do with the port.
The port now, that port that made so much money, they trying to buy other ports. They made so much money of the payment poor, overcharging on one pallet. You think that was a good deal? And you're getting them a 50-year month-win contract to be paid off the Bahamas, of the payment poor people. Why? Why should they don't do
The
that?
largest shareholder of the port is the government of the Bahamas. The Bahamian people. They own 60%.
On your
So-
contract, you are getting 10% interest every year.
Caller, Robert, when you say y'all, who's y'all? Who are you referring to?
The income administration allows the people who are the 19 rich family who are getting.
That is not correct. There was a group consisting of 20 people who were either shippers or landowners, port owners, was not all of the port. For instance, one of the families that owns property downtown did not opt into it. So other shipping companies and persons involved. That was 20%. The remaining 80% is spread another 20% between the general public and the remaining 60% by the government of the Bahamas.
So do you own any shares in the port, Brent?
I have shares. A company which I have shares in has shares in the port, but a very small number of shares. But the point is the caller is misleading about. Now, regarding the fees, I'm not up to speed on what the fees is, and there is a provision for increase in fees. But one of the directors, if not more than one of the directors, of the port is appointed by the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to look after the interests of the people of the Bahamas, who are a large shareholder. So I think we have to put that in the perspective.
Go ahead, Richard, wrap it up for me. Go ahead.
Now, last 5 years, 5 years ago, you was up on, you hired extra staff in a private suite at Hawkins Hill, giving them passports. Didn't you hire extra staff last 5 years ago?
We had, in the passport office, we had a group of 10 persons that came from the College of the Bahamas to help with, I think it was 10, might have been more than that. But hang on, let me finish.
Let me answer, Richard.
10 persons that were hired from the College of the Bahamas. We ran, I think, 3 shifts of 8 hours to deal with the backlog of persons who needed passports. It was not election time, sir. I'm sorry. I don't want to. You are not speaking the truth. So in the passport office, they were not. It was not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
All right,
And
Robert,
then,
listen, thanks
against
for
the
calling, Robert.
background, the president and minister is doing the same thing.
So to set the record straight on that, you didn't hire you didn't hire people and gave them citizenship to work at the port, is what he's getting to.
No, he's saying the passport office.
The passport office.
Absolutely
You didn't
not.
get, yeah, absolutely
And
not.
at immigration, we did extras. We did bring in some more people over the period of time to actually expedite some of the backlog. If the caller wants to think that was for political reasons, there were 100 people hired at immigration the other day.
Right.
So what were those 100 people?
So you saying Fred
So
Mitchell just hired a bunch of people?
If you're going to hit me with that stick,
Hit Fred.
hit Fred with the same stick, because 100 people up there, so, and I don't know where they're sitting. And you saw the person with a picture. She showed her picture,
Right.
4th of April, and she showed her citizenship.
Yeah,
There was probably a bus waiting there to go to a special place.
I saw
So,
that.
you know,
I
so
saw that
let's-
floating around.
If it's bad for me, it's bad for the current fella.
So, to straighten this out, because a lot of people think you own the port. What percentage of the port you own? Just put a number on it so we can kill this.
I have no idea.
You have no idea what percentage you
I
own.
have. There are 20 entities that were originally part of the 20%.
Right.
I don't want to call.
Don't call it names.
But,
We just.
no, but I want to make sure people listening. Some of them were the shipping lines.
Right.
Some of them were the persons who involved with the stevedoring and the movement of. Some of them were the landowners.
Right.
Now the reason being is that there were several shipping docks between the Prime Minister's office and the bridge,
Right.
who were obviously you were taking away a benefit to them, so they had the right, and they bought in, and that money was used for the development of the port.
Was this open to the Bahamians to chip in and
It was
and
open
invest?
to a number of persons in that.
When you say
Then-
number of persons,
I'll
what is
come to-
open to Bahamian citizens
Then,
to?
yes. Then
Okay.
Mr. Ingram did a public offering of those shares.
Gotcha.
Where persons certainly who work for government were allowed to buy shares for, I think it was $1 when the shares were worth
Wow.
$10.
Wow.
And they were allowed to have, I'm not sure about the price, but I think the price was a price difference. But they were also allowed to do salary deduction in order to buy those shares. So another large percentage went out, which I think matched the 20% that the caller was talking about.
Right.
But the remaining 60%, I may be off a couple percentage
The
points.
government owns that.
The government or national insurance or the government.
So
entity-
Brent don't own 60% of the port.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Clear
not.
that up right now.
Yeah.
Because everybody think Brent's all over the place buying up everything.
You know,
Is that the case or
I,
not?
I wish I had the money Joe Public says I have, because I would be somewhere else other than my truck.
Your
Right.
blue, nice looking F-150. Now, so Brent ain't buying everything up. You ain't trying to buy. You're not a capitalistic guy.
No, I'm not. Look, I was involved with the 1980s, when we took the Commonwealth Bank from Canadian ownership to Bahamian ownership.
Right.
We offered shares to the widest possible selection of Bahamians.
When you said we, who's we?
The group that were involved in the Bahamianization of Commonwealth Bank.
Okay.
It's gone out to some 8,000 shareholders.
Right.
That's how you do things. That's how I
Right.
wish more Bahamians could be empowered to own their own businesses, develop their own. Now, we have to find something different than a development bank.
Right.
We have to find a true way of getting Bahamians into business.
So for the record, you don't own Commonwealth Bank either?
I own shares in Commonwealth Bank.
You own the majority of shares?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely.
50%?
No.
30?
First of all, central bank doesn't allow you to do that.
Okay, but see,
You see?
listen, the perception out there is that you own Commonwealth Bank, so you don't own the bank.
I'm not on the board of Commonwealth Bank. I own shares in Commonwealth Bank. I have no control over what Commonwealth Bank does whatsoever.
A lot of Bahamians think you own Commonwealth Bank. They think you own the port. They think you own a lot of things.
Totally wrong.
Do you own the F&M?
No.
Did you bring money to the F&M?
No.
Because people thought you got back into the F&M with a bag of money.
No.
No promises
I
by
have
minutes.
fundraised money for the F&M. I won't say that.
Why did you distance yourself from the F&M in 2012, even though you said you were going to resign and you wasn't going to run? But to the public eye, you stayed away from the F&M for almost 4.5 years. Explain that. Why did you intentionally do that?
My children were born at a time.
You had kids in 2012?
My children were born during my time in politics.
Okay.
My wife was breastfeeding, and her milk dried up in the time of active politics. One of my children said, "Daddy, we had to wake up early to see you because you were always in." That got to me.
Right.
And I said, 2012, after 20 years, was enough time
That's acceptable.
to get out of. That was a personal. That was the reason.
Right. But
It
not
was
like...
it was nothing to do with the FNM or anything. It was something that I wanted to spend more time
Right.
with my wife and family.
Not like these other guys who get caught up in something and they claim family problems and then 6 months later they're back in politics again.
I spent 5 wonderful years getting to know my children and everything else and spending time with my family.
Are you good friends with Hubert Ingram today?
Yes.
Do you have a relationship?
Hubert and Ingram and I speak regularly. Yeah.
If Ingram would write a letter of reference for you, what do you think he would say? Would he be supportive of you?
That's a good question. Friends of mine have told me that he has spoken highly of me. I hope I was a very good cabinet minister with him. We tried to work as many of our difficulties out as possible. No, I did not leave frontline politics because of Hubert Ingram.
All right.
We made an incredible combination.
The U.S. Embassy would have said otherwise.
And WikiLeaks might have said something else too. No, it was an honor and a privilege to work under Hubert Ingram. He had fantastic foresight. Maybe he was a little rough around the edges, a little gruff.
Right.
But he had the Bahamian public, general Bahamian people's interests at heart.
But he allowed you, Brent Symonette, Deputy Prime Minister, to play a pivotal role in the last government that you were part of. Or
Yes,
did he?
yes.
Or did he had you? Were you?
No,
Were you his puppet?
No, absolutely not.
Not his puppet.
No. Ingram and I had an understanding with each other. We knew it each other, and a lot of our views were very similar.
Okay, that's
a lot
good.
of our views are very similar.
Right. We're gonna take a break, and we will be back with some more questions for Mr. Symonette. You have 2 on the line.
Real Talk
Welcome back to Real Talk Live. This is your host, Professor Tinker. Sitting in studio with me is Brent Symonette. I wasn't going to say sitting in the hot seat because he's doing pretty good. He's dancing with these questions and he's answering them to the best of his abilities and he's hitting them on straightforward. Other boogeyman question before we take these two calls. People are saying that because they think you supported the DNA, do you take responsibility for the F&M loss in 2012? People are tying you with that loss, that you supported outside forces because you had an issue with Ingram.
I didn't have an issue with Ingram. I didn't support the DNA. Matter of fact, Brian McCartney resigned from. I was his substantive minister. I was even out of the country when he resigned. So he didn't discuss it with me.
So you didn't wire him the money?
I wouldn't even think about it.
You didn't leave the money behind the dilly tree?
Didn't leave the money behind the dilly tree.
And the chicken in the bag?
You're saying that. That's wonderful. Fred Mitchell the other day says, follow the money.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. Well, you see these pictures on social media about Perry Christie in the jet?
Right. I saw that. Yeah.
Whose jet?
Exactly, yeah.
Whose jet?
Whose jet
Follow the money.
Right.
At the same time,
you got
see
Fitzgerald just laying off.
Laying off. And follow the money also when you see pictures of certain cabinet ministers out somewhere out west partying with some guy who ain't a Bahamian.
Wow, interesting.
So when you talk about follow the money, an apple
so
is
we're
an apple.
squashing that. You
An
ain't
apple is
give the DNA no money, and you ain't giving them no money for the 2007 election either.
Not a red nickel.
Sorry, Brandon.
Brandon, you're out of luck.
Let's go to this next call. Caller, you live. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning, sir.
All right, good morning to you guys as well.
Good morning.
And good morning to the nation. I was listening to the conversation intently, and a couple of things came to mind as I listened, right? Well, a couple of concerns, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you touched on it at the onset of your show, Professor Tinko, but nonetheless. When I look at and I listened to some of the statements that he's made in terms of if Terry Gladstone Christie, our nation's prime minister, up to the time that the Provost made the announcement at the House of Assembly today, when I listened to the statements that Mr. Symonette made that he would come back to secure the country if the Prime Minister continues to make such decisions. I think on some of these things that make me wonder why does he feel he's the person to make such a bold statement as though he can make the difference when he sat in the in the former Prime Minister, the Ingram's cabinet, right? He was a part of that crew who made that very poor decision against the board recommendation as it relates to purchasing those generators down at BEC, which is the part of
I think you need to check the date of that. You need to check the date of that, please. When was that decision made? No. When was that decision made?
I don't recall.
Thank you. So check the date and check the dates.
Are you denying being in the cabinet when that decision was made, sir?
To the best of my ability, I was not in cabinet, and I was not. I was not part of that.
You were not a part of that.
No.
Okay, but that's on the record. Also,
You can check the dates.
Let me look at the fact that Mr. Ingram himself created the rules as it relates to parliamentarians and cabinet ministers in particular, and them disassociating themselves from their interests and ensuring that they don't take advantage of conflict of interest situations through empowering themselves or their companies, etc. But the very fact that you were found wanting when you were the chairman at the airport authority and Mr. Ingram asked for your resignation as a result of it, that also drew concern to my mind when I listened to you making statements as though you are the person to come back and make the change.
And for that issue, I also resigned. So you know, at some point.
If I may make my point respectfully, Mr. Symonette, right? As I'm saying, when I listen to you talk about coming back, if Mr. Christie continues to make such decisions as Prime Minister to be the savior or to ensure that the Bahamas gets back on track, when I think about the things that you would have done while you served in Mr. Ingram's cabinet, when we look at the fact that you would have, that your company, not only did you have to resign for that decision, but your company also benefits tremendously as a result of the sidewalk contract. When we look at the road improvement contract underneath the Hubert Ingram-led administration, right? When we look at the fact that
caller, in the essence, listen, go ahead, because in the essence of time, the line's lit up, because he's going to take forever to answer those questions. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
When I look at the fact that this of this recession when you were bragging about the millions of dollars that the Department of Immigration was taking in, which meant that Bahamians, every million work permits, etc., down in immigration, it meant that more and more, perhaps thousands of Bahamians and tens of thousands of Bahamians would have been losing opportunities for employment in our country at a time maybe while at the height of recession. And those things, to my mind, don't add up to the person who's making the statement that they're going to bring the change that is necessary in this country. Those things add up to, in my mind, something that we need to be concerned about from a political perspective. Thanks for the opportunity. God bless.
Thank you. Go ahead and respond to that, sir.
Well,
before
first
we
of
take
all,
the call.
I would never brag about getting dollars in immigration because I'm a believer we should reduce, wherever possible, the number of non-Bahamian works part in the economy. So I think we have to look at that. With regard to my involvement, I was not a cabinet minister. I took a decision as chairman of the airport authority, which was probably wrong in the sense of what was done. I resigned for it. That was in 2000 and something. Yes, that happened. The airport was not downgraded as a result. Fine. So, you know, the issue is, at least I resigned too. I can sidetrack and find other people in cabinet with Perry Christie were potentially alleged to have done certain events. They went straight through and never resigned. So, you know,
So you took responsibility
I
for
took
it.
responsibility for it. I learned from it. The number of times I've heard the former DPM Mother Pratt say second chance. That's one of the things the PLP believe in.
Yeah, he definitely
There's
said
a
that.
second chance every step of the way.
Right.
But now the caller says, "Oh, not for you."
But I think
So, at some point,
he said, well, who you are to make such statement, but you were the
you
former...
learn also
Yeah, but
from those mistakes.
You learned from the mistakes, but furthermore, you were the former deputy prime minister, you were the former attorney general, you're the former minister of
And
foreign
I think we
affairs. So
also-
I think, but what I'm trying to get
But
at...
I think the caller also has to realize that in the last 5 years, there have been very few public bids by the government.
But I
They have
think...
qualified, they have selected who can qualify for a bid, as opposed to going out for public bid.
Yeah, but
So,
besides
under the-
that, I'm saying I think in your capacity of what you have been, of the positions you've held, I think you can make the statement you're making.
But we also, companies I'm involved in, hire hundreds of Bahamians.
Right.
I mean, I won't tell you what the payroll checks are for some of these companies, but there are a lot of Bahamians that are hired by that are benefiting. So therefore, there is practical knowledge that I get.
We'll take
Yes,
this
you
next
hold me
call.
to task for that. I've learned from the mistakes.
Caller, you live?
Hello.
Good morning, caller, you live?
Good morning. First time caller.
Thank you.
Yes, awesome. I'm not calling for any technicalities in terms of what he did from what he did to. As a Bahamian citizen, my question to the Symonette is this. I'm sure that he's aware of what's going on social media, but the persons are saying that he actually returned back to the FNM party to override minutes. Just wanting to ask him a personal, I'm sure persons who are listening have the question as well. We don't have the opportunity to ask. What is the mean to the party? And what is how do you think Minister as a leader? I'm just wanting to hear that
Okay.
from Minister.
Thank you, caller.
I fully support Dr. Minnis. He's the leader of the FNM. It's no secret that I was supporting Loretta Butler Turner at the convention. Dr. Minnis won the election. He has my full support as the leader. There are a lot of mischief going around that I have ulterior motives. I have no ulterior motives about replacing Dr. Minnis or even wanting to be Prime Minister.
And you're not giving that woman in Kalani any money.
I'm not giving that woman in Kalani. I have had the opportunity in the last 5 years when I was Deputy Prime Minister to be acting Prime Minister and represent the Bahamas around the world. I met numerous leaders. I have no interest whatsoever in being Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Let's take this next call. Caller, go ahead, you're live.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you? Good morning to your guest, Mr. Brent.
Morning. Good.
Country. I have a question. I want to take this process from yesterday. Could you tell me what was the economy of the Bahamas including 1967? Were we living where our economy was high? Were we living in a deficit? Compared to our economy after 1967 to 1992, when
you,
Go ahead, sir.
You know what I'm saying? I want to know them as far as our plan for the economy support. We expected that we have behaviors in an economy with surplus.
Thanks a lot, Carl. I'll let Mrs. Symonette answer the question.
some of you must have been on anyway. It was very disjointed.
Yeah, he was asking
First of all,
pre-independence, post-independence economy.
let's try and interject something here. The Bahamas first got a premier in 1964. Prior to 64, we were governed by Executive Council, Legislative Council, and a British governor. So from the period of 64 to 67 was definitely a balanced budget with a surplus. The UBP left money in the economy. Successive governments have increased the spending and have created deficits for the next 67 to whatever we are, 2017. So I think in terms of unemployment, we are now at what, some 16%, and I think under the F&M administration it was between 12 and 14%. So you can look at all these figures and see who's done better than the other. I think during certainly one of the F&M administrations we had a huge economic recession worldwide, and there were programs that the F&M did that were developmental programs to create a bridge over the recession. So things like the road projects, those were projects that had to be done. Money was borrowed for them, but the long-term benefit can be seen over that. So I think you can run from in the 60s, 64, 67, where you did have a number of persons that had two jobs, to a person where we have 12, 14% to now 16, 17%, a number of children unemployed, number of young people unemployed. And I think that's the background which you have to look at it.
In 2012, at the F&M SNAP convention to determine its leadership after the loss, Hubert Ingram gave his farewell speech. In the last few minutes of his speech, he told his party's delegates and the future leadership teams how to be an effective opposition. He stated the following: hold the new government accountable for its outlandish promises during the election campaign. You must also do everything in your opportunity to hold their feet to the fire. Start with crime, continue with education, and hold their feet to the fire on education. Has the opposition been effectively doing that over the last 5 years?
I think they have. I think barring the restraints you have in a parliamentary system where the numbers aren't there.
Now the people are listening to you.
No, I think.
Are you standing by that?
I think if you look and see, I want to address one issue. There's been a misconception about the Public Accounts Committee.
Right.
The current MP for St. Anne's, some people have said that he's been weak in the Public Accounts Committee. One of the issues that the Christie administration did was they said, okay, Public Accounts Commission can only look at accounts for the government that have been tabled. And that became the rule, and no other accounts could get looked at. And traditionally government
You said Perry Christie, the current Prime Minister, did that.
Yes.
Was that legal?
That's a different issue.
Well, explain to me. Was it legal?
In my opinion, the way the public account should operate is any money spent by any arm of a government should be open for consideration by the opposition-controlled accounts committee.
Because that's the way you check the government's
That's the way-
power.
Yeah, you can't check something that is now tabled some 5 and 10 years later.
Wow.
One of the first, the F&M administration that I served in, both of them, we tried to bring the accounts of companies and corporations and ministries up to date.
Right.
You have the Auditor General now who has laid on the table accounts where he says there's millions of dollars missing, and one minister just says, oh, he must be guessing or something. I think that's what they said. But their problem with that is, in a lot of times, and the Auditor General will tell you, that a lot of reasons of his frustration is because the government departments are not answering his questions.
Right.
And that's something that has to change too. We have to have a real-time accounting by government.
So last-minute decision to do that, in your legal experience, former Attorney General, you don't see a problem with that?
With doing what?
To restrict what the Accounts Committee can
Oh,
look
I
at?
think you're just obviously scared.
Right.
I mean, a Public Accounts Committee is exactly that. It's supposed
Keep accounting.
Keep accounting.
Right.
Now, if you pull out some book and say that's the way they do it in Mother England and whatever, that's wrong. We got to make sure it is there because if there's no fear that in getting caught.
Has Hubert Chipman officially endorsed you yet for the Senate seat?
I've spoken to him, and I intend to ask him to be one of the minimum of 5 to sign my letter of nomination.
Okay, all right. You openly supported Loretta Butler Turner. Did she disappoint you by pulling
I
out
won't
of
say
that
she-
last by pulling out
Oh.
of the last race?
The decision,
to quit.
in that hour at that late night.
Right.
I certainly.
I was disappointed.
I was asleep. I was disappointed. I
You
would've-
woke up disappointed.
well,
'cause you was
when I
asleep.
woke. Yeah, when I woke up,
You
and
were
heard it, I
disappointed.
was disappointed. Yes. She should have gone in the fight.
I totally agree.
Taken her blows
I totally agree.
and moved on.
Did you support her financially?
No.
No.
Let me.
Sure. Rethink.
I have to.
I
don't
think you probably
no,
gave her
no,
some chicken
no,
in the
no,
bag
no,
money.
no. What we did was, there was an agreement that the two candidates and then another group would raise money.
Okay.
So I was in the other group that raised money for the F&M for the convention.
What's your opinion on the letter of no confidence to the time they decided to do that? Did you advise in this?
No, I was not. I was not.
You're
I-
totally away from that.
Matter of fact, I just returned from holiday, and
Right.
my wife heard about it on the radio. She called me on the telephone, and that's how I heard about it.
And you were in the air disappointed again.
No, I think
wasn't
I
disappointed?
think the timing was wrong. I
Right.
don't think that it should have happened that way. But
Right.
that was their view.
In your opinion, what's the fate of the 7? You think they're done politically?
I don't think any of them will get elected.
That's a good point.
I think only one's running.
Right, yeah, only one's running. Is this group ready to lead? Is this current menace group ready to take over the Bahamas?
Yes.
Are you confident?
But hang on,
With this
just
group.
on that issue.
Yeah.
When Sir Lyndon took over in 1967,
Uh-huh.
no one had been in his party had been in cabinet before.
Right.
Was he ready?
But there's so much talk about some
Yeah,
of the
talk-
candidates in this group.
But talk is talk.
Talk is cheap too.
You know, at some point you've got someone like Denisio Diagler, who's a known business person. You've got Marvin Dames, who's a known...
Now you calling
Uh,
off all these Sarkis people? Did they come with some money to your?
I know of no
you-
connection with...
Jeff Lloyd.
Okay, I'm just starting on...
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
let's
but
say
you-
Frankie Campbell. Is he...
Well,
is he
No. You see, you start calling off these high-profile guys, Dames, Diagler, and now is Diagler doing the laundry for the F&M?
He's laundering the PLP. dirty laundry.
So you say Diagler, Dames, and Jeff Lloyd to
Yeah.
your humble,
And you stop me there.
and I stop you there.
You stop me there. You've got other...
But did they bring any money from Sarkis
I have
to
no,
your knowledge?
I have no idea. If they brought in-
Did they increase the profile of the F&M?
Increase the profile of the F&M? Yes.
take it, let's take it.
This, whether Sarkis money, I
Let's
don't
take
know.
a call. Did they?
No.
No. Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, is where I sit, I have not seen any money coming from Sarkis to the F&M.
I'm stealing 2 minutes here because we're completely out of time. You stated you don't want to be PM. Who does not? Now listen, now, I know you're a lawyer, and I know you know what people think about you. I think you would be a good prime minister.
Okay.
Why don't you want to be prime minister? Please.
Why do I have to be?
Yeah, but no. Listen,
No.
come
Look,
on.
I'm the son of a
Okay,
premier.
hold on
I'm
one
the-
second.
I'm the
Hold on
son
one
of a-
second.
no.
Let me interject. Hold on, man. The son of a premier, former lawyer, business owner, attorney general, minister of foreign affairs, this, that, all the other thing, good husband. Why don't you want to be PM?
Because I don't want to be.
Why not?
Because I don't want to be.
I don't believe you, Brent. Why not? Are you suffering?
can't,
Are
unfortunately-
you suffering from the UBP ghosts?
No.
But why
no.
wouldn't you want to be prime
Because
minister?
I don't like pink shoes. That's my opinion. I really...
I think you're scared, man.
No, I'm not scared.
And you know why I think
No,
you're scared?
no,
You know why?
no,
Let me tell you
know,
why.
You know why?
You know why you're scared?
Why?
Because I think you mightn't live up to the standard of what people think
Absolutely
you're going to do.
No,
Because I
no.
think you have some good qualities to be prime
Thank
minister.
you.
What's wrong with
Thank
that?
you. Because I don't want that job.
But you can always be under some guy who doesn't see your vision.
If as the caller said, I assume, if I'm part of the F&M government,
Right.
I have my time around the table to put my views forward.
But
I
if
can-
menacing on your run, your views ain't gonna matter.
Then what happens then to any right-thinking cabinet minister they resign.
So,
Because you see, a cabinet is collective responsibility.
Exactly.
I'm talking to the fellas who are in government now.
right.
If you don't agree with the Prime Minister or you're doing your own thing,
Uh-huh.
you get out the boat. Because you accept responsibility
Uh-huh.
for whatever cabinet decision is made. You
So-
can't come back and say, oh, I didn't agree with that.
So based on what you're saying today on Real Talk Live, Menace ain't got to worry about you jucking him up because you don't even
Absolutely
want to
not.
be Prime
Absolutely
Minister.
not. But he knew that anyway, because I've told him that many
Oh,
occasions.
you gave him the dagger?
No, because we don't need a dagger. He can have the dagger, and I'll sit right there, and he won't stick me, I won't stick him.
Listen,
Because you
Bigger-
see, he's the leader,
Hey.
but he's going to surround himself with a team.
Right.
And that team will collectively
Right.
provide better government than the fellas who are there now.
Because the Bahamas has drifted away from this issue of race, and I must humbly tell you, I mean, I'm a teacher. I see things. I teach criminal justice. I'm always analyzing. I think you could serve as Prime Minister to the capacity of bettering the country. Because listen, you take a successful businessman, you've made money, you've made millions. You've been groomed under your father, really, but not to be Prime Minister, but you would have seen some of the things you'd have done. You've lived through this time. You've worked under former Prime Ministers. You have observed the current Prime Minister.
And now's
Why
the time,
not?
But now's the time also to train some of the younger Bahamians.
Train who?
I think I'm probably one of the older ones in running. So train all the younger fellas to come up and take their natural position. You know, you look at Mr. Christie, Mr. Nye.
Are you training your son?
Yes.
He wants to get into politics?
No, I
No.
don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he's
I don't think
23,
so.
right?
25.
25.
I don't think so. But that's a different issue. But I'm training him in other parts of my business and
Okay.
everything else. But you look at, you diverted, Mr. Christie, Mr. Knowledge, and all of them. They're 70 odd years of age.
They need to go.
There's time to retire.
Okay.
You know?
I respect that from you.
There's time, and that's one of the reasons why. One of the reasons I did get out because my wife and also my age. It was time for younger kids in the Bahamas not to. We should stop blocking up top posts.
We're flat out of time. Just in 10
By
seconds,
people
just
of
wrap
age.
up. Just give your final statement.
Bahamians, today has been an interesting day. We've had a great conversation here, but more importantly, the election was announced for May 10th. I trust that each and every one of us will use our best endeavors, think seriously long about the future of the Bahamas, and vote for the person who you think will be the best MP and the best government for your Bahamas as we go forward. Thank you very much.
And listen, I want to thank you, Brent Symonette, with all your titles. Like, too long to call them all off. This has been an awesome interview. You spoke straightforward. You didn't dance around any questions, and you answered some difficult questions. You answered some hard questions that hit the core of who you are, what your capabilities are, your past, and all this legacy stigma that you would have been carrying around, or people still see you as. And I just want to thank you for your contribution to the conversation today. And again, I still think you can be an awesome Prime Minister. But now the FNM knows that you're not on their run to take any sort of leadership. So I hope they embrace you. If you guys are successful on May 10th, give you the support you need, put you where you can best serve, and just release you and let you do what you need to do. Today, Real Talk was brought to you by Superwash, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, the Air Conditioning Depot, BTC, Nationals Workers Cooperative Credit Union, Virgo Car Rental, Water and Sewage Corporation, Storm Free Windows, Bahamian Brewery Company Limited, Wendy's, Marco's Pizza, Popeyes, Paisley Cosmetics Experience the Paisley difference. And again, listen, you can also go and get this show online because it was streaming on YouTube. Another awesome interview, and I want to thank Brent Symonette again, the ratified candidate of St. Anne's. I think he's going to be successful over there, and we'll see what happens on May 10th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome show, man.
All right.
Previous program.